But Sandy really was just something that really pushed us to the limit. That storm surge, it was such a risk to a lot of our substations that were delivering critical power. That experience reshaped how we think about resiliency.
What it was like to understand the scope of what would be needed to achieve a full recovery.
What was most damaged, most flooded, focus on restoring critical infrastructure and bringing the system back with as many customers as possible.
Resilience gets more difficult as technology becomes a bigger part of the equation.
Modernization has to happen not only carefully, but also very methodically coordinated to ensure that reliability is ensured every step of the way. The workforce is the most important asset that you have. The people will always make the difference. You take care of your employees will take care of your system and your customers.
How do you keep the power grid nimble when once-in-a-generation storms happen all the time? Today, we are about to find out. Hey everyone, and welcome to Power Perspectives. I'm Kinsey Grant Baker. The year 2012. Superstorm Sandy, the largest Atlantic hurricane on record as measured by diameter, is barreling through 8 countries, inflicting nearly $70 billion in damages, which is about $98 billion these days, and taking the lives of 254 people. Here in the Northeast, Sandy has become a hard-learned lesson in the dire necessity of building a more resilient power grid. Some 2 million people lost power in New York City alone, and the surrounding areas were just as severely affected. But what happens after a superstorm? In the case of Sandy and the efforts undertaken by New Jersey utility PSE&G, quite a lot. More than 90% of PSE&G's customers were left in the dark post-Sandy, but today we're going to learn about the utility's efforts to keep that from ever happening again. The quick rundown? Over the last decade, the company has invested roughly $30 billion, elevated 42 substations above flood levels, installed 1,500 plus smart switching devices, replaced more than 1,600 miles of aging gas mains, and cut methane leaks by 45%, all while also achieving measurable improvements in outages, restoration speed, and community resilience. So how'd they do it? Paul Toscarelli, PSE&G's VP of Electric Operations, is here to explain what worked, what didn't, and what other utilities should learn from New Jersey's emergency recovery and planning playbook post-Superstorm Sandy. Paul, welcome to Power Perspectives. How are you today?
Good, Kinsey. Thanks for having me here today.
Of course, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. We have a lot to cover. Superstorm Sandy feels like both a lifetime ago and something that I'm sure for many of our listeners is very much a recent memory. So we have a lot to unpack. We'll have some fun having this conversation and getting into what recovery looks like, what resilience looks like today. But before we start, I want to get a little bit more perspective on your role. You're joining us from PSE&G's high-profile department, mostly focused on operations and emergency preparedness. So tell me a little bit more about maybe your background and some of the work that you and your team do.
Sure thing. So I'm here in my 28th year at PSE&G, and I've had some progression of responsibility from engineering management and now leading a large group in the organization in electric operations and emergency preparedness. I learned from the ground up. I've been part of a lot of great things here at PSE&G, and I've experienced a lot of events, both exciting as well as challenging, and also experienced many changes in New Jersey and in the energy industry that reshape our lives, our focus, how we conduct business, and the very best thing that we can do for our customers, our employees, and all of our stakeholders. As far as my emergency preparedness team goes, we work 365 days a year, examining for the what if scenarios, making sure those Sandys of the future we're prepared for, and we're ready to take on that challenge each and every day.
Absolutely. And looking to the future is going to be a big part of this conversation, I imagine. I started this with saying that it feels like we're getting more and more of these kinds of major storms that require really major, investment or response from utilities, from the folks who are listening today. So we're going to get to that future part of this conversation shortly. Before we do, though, let's take a look back to the past. I would love, Paul, if you could take me back to 2012. The most important part of this conversation is understanding the human impact. On a human level, what was it like for you during this storm?
From a human level, the first part of it, it was such a monumental game changer here in New Jersey. The weather event itself, the winds, the rain, the storm surge, the way it impacted New Jersey and all the surrounding areas was epic proportions. What we experienced and how we responded together, not just PSE&G, but I mean all New Jerseyans, was really a testament of our perseverance, our own resiliency, and that's what makes it what we like to call Jersey ready. We really looked at what happened during that event, again into the future, as we'll speak about, of what we wanted to do differently. The scale of what was happening was unlike anything we experienced before. Many of us were working around the clock, while also worrying about our own families and communities, because the storm impacted nearly every part of New Jersey. Nearly 90% of our customers lost power. What we really stood out was a sense of mission. Our crews, our engineers, support folks, they all focused on getting the power and the gas service back to our customers as quickly and as safely as possible. There's a lot of personal sacrifices that were made by our employees during that event, and how PSE&G worked with government officials, other emergency response agencies, customers, and others is just something to look back and be proud of. There were a lot of variables during the storm event, and this super-sized, Sandy-sized event exasperates these dynamics. Any event is tough in any case, but Sandy really was just something that really pushed us to the limit. It's not a plug and play effort. There's a consistent pivoting to ensure that the changing circumstances during and after the event are coordinated, acted upon, handled with the best interest in mind of our employees, their safety, our electric and gas systems, as well as the communities we serve.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there was, to put it simply, a ton to manage on the ground when all of this was happening. You're talking about doing the work that is required of a utility, keeping your people safe, thinking about your own communities and families and how you can keep them safe. It sounds like just a ton to manage. So from the utility business perspective, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the operational realities, sort of on the ground as Sandy was hitting? What was it like? Did anything surprise you? Tell me a little bit more about that time and how you were thinking about it as a utility operator.
Yes, well, again, it's not speaking personally as well as for the company. That storm surge was something that we historically had never seen before. It was such a risk to a lot of our infrastructure. A lot of our substations that were delivering critical power were flooded. That experience reshaped how we think about resiliency. It made it clear that we needed a system that was not just reliable on day to day, but also how to withstand these types of extreme weather events.
Yeah, I think a lot of it probably boils down to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. I think is sort of the resounding logic when we're talking about an event like this and the lessons that we take away from it. As the clouds were starting to part, tell me a little bit about what it was like to understand the scope of what would be needed to achieve a full recovery. How did you start recovering from something like Sandy? What's the first step, and how do you understand the way that first step takes you to steps 2, 3, 4, 104?
Well, Kinsey, even before you get to step one, once that storm passes, yeah, one must be mentally ready for the tough and long haul. As leadership, we must also be able to rally our employees and also have a watchful eye on everyone because we care. Our employees were victims of Sandy as well. They had homes without power, damaged from the storm, and even flooded in some cases. And we had to make sure our employees were physically and mentally prepared for the weeks to come. So it was very important for us to be able to lean on each other, hold each other up, and never be too proud to call for help. But back to step one, the first step was really to get an overall assessment of the damage. We needed good intel from the field of what areas of our system were most impacted, what was most damaged, most flooded, and understanding how those parts of our system were affected and what needed immediate attention from a public safety standpoint, and then the focus on restoring critical infrastructure and bringing the system back with as many customers as possible. But at the same time, what we're already thinking about was how are we going to rebuild our system, both our electric and gas system, in a way that makes the system stronger than it was before that would stand the next Sandy.
Yeah, one of the questions that I'm sure utility professionals are used to hearing all the time after an event that does take the power out is, when will the power be back? What is the timeline here? So let's talk about timelines. How did the planning ahead for, what future recovery might look like when we're talking about understanding when that recovery might start, when that recovery might be finished, when, timelines might start to emerge in an event like Sandy, or after an event like Sandy. What was that like? How did you start to understand the when element of this recovery?
Well, the first week, as all can imagine, was definitely very chaotic. Once the storm was starting to pass and clear, that first week was really about assessment, and then the next couple of weeks really gave us the next few days rather gave us a good indication of how long things would start taking. And again, from a prioritization standpoint, we're always looking to get the critical infrastructure back first, get the largest amount of customers back at as quickly as possible. And that was really about getting these substations that were flooded back into an operational condition. Once that starts happening, then it gets to be much more tactical, much more neighborhood and community based as far as the restorations activities go.
And how long did it take to get those substations back in working order?
Some of them took a week, some of them took longer. All in all, 2 to 3 weeks to get them all back.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine what it must have been like to try to lead through an event like this, to think about your own families. It must have been really something incredibly challenging and difficult. But it has, in many ways, given way to sort of the silver lining of all of this being the investments that have been made to avoid things like this happening again, to prepare for the worst and hope for the best, as we were talking about before. So in the decade and a half or so since Sandy, PSE&G has invested a ton of money across gas and electric. Tell me a little bit more about some of the high level priorities for this sort of new era of resilience at PSE&G. What were some of the high level goals that you set for long term recovery in that post Sandy era?
Well, over the past decade, we've invested about $30 billion into our electric and gas system, and about nearly three-quarters of that was focused specifically on improving reliability and resilience. And what that really means, those investments strengthen our grids for our customers to see fewer outages, faster restoration times, stronger performance, not only during the day-to-day operations, but during these severe weather conditions as well. So a lot of that was elevating these substations. That was one of the more important areas that we saw after Sandy, and we made that a priority.
I understand you elevated 42 substations. I imagine at a tactical level, this is a pretty big undertaking. Tell me a little bit more about some of the scale of, planning, permitting, execution for a project like this. What was it like?
Well, elevating those substations was absolutely a massive undertaking. It involved a lot of engineering redesigns, permitting, site development, complex construction, commissioning operations, as well as very careful coordination with the local communities. We focused on these areas that were most affected by Sandy, that we saw as the highest risks by storms and by flooding events. So, as you mentioned, this included raising these 42 stations above Sandy flood levels. It also involved installing over 1,500 smart switching devices in the field that can automatically reroute power, giving us a more self-healing system. And it implemented a lot of advanced outage and grid management technologies on our system to detect outages, remotely access and analyze trouble to help aid personnel in faster restoration of service. So, regarding the design and construction, in many cases, we had to rethink the physical layouts of the facilities while keeping them operational, feeding customers, which is a very, very complex challenge requiring a lot of internal coordination. But the payoff was very significant. Those substations are now protected from the type of flooding that we saw during Sandy. And what we saw after Sandy, after post Sandy events, it yielded significant differences in our outages. With all of the other rainfall and flooding, our investments paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I imagine too there were probably some, maybe we'll call them unforeseen challenges or surprises in that process, as it was a massive undertaking. Anything you would share with the class? What were some of the surprises as you tried to make this project happen and keep the lights on while doing all of this hard work?
Yeah, some of the surprises was really just integrating some of our older equipment with our newer equipment, making sure that the compatibility between equipment and technology and the footprints that we needed as far as real estate goes. Those were some of the more interesting challenges that we had. And each one had yielded its own different types of challenges throughout our service territory.
Yeah. This idea of integrating older and newer equipment is something that I think is really interesting. You're upgrading a ton of infrastructure while also coming to grips with the new needs of a new, more modern power grid. I would love to hear your thoughts on maybe any lessons about the interoperability, let's call it, between some of these legacy systems, some of this new grid tech. What did that relationship look like, and how have you seen it evolve?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, one of those challenges in integrating that new infrastructure with an older infrastructure that was built many decades ago. Not just PSE&G, but many utilities operate a very large, complex network of systems. So modernization has to happen not only carefully, but also very methodically coordinated to ensure that reliability is ensured every step of the way. But the good news is these projects really made us really pushed us to innovate and adopt new technologies that improve both resiliency and operational flexibility. It also made us look ahead into the future to make sure this technology, these investments, not only made sense in the near future for what we are doing, but also would be compatible with even new systems for the years to come.
Yeah. I'm curious about the financial elements of all of this. We're talking about some really big projects. I imagine, as most people listening to this probably will as well. Really big projects often have really big price tags. Where does the money come from to pull off a massive investment plan like this?
Well, the money comes from an investment strategy, as an investor-owned utility, we look very carefully at what we want to invest in from our infrastructure standpoint, and we ensure that we're always investing in a very smart way possible, and always keeping affordability in mind with everything that we do. And affordability can come into the form of value to our customers, what the value our customers see and how they experience these improvements, how their power stays on, how it's restored faster when it does go out, how we communicate with them, how our customers can benefit by all of these investments with peace of mind, as well as being able to live their lives, go to work, go to school, run their businesses with safe, reliable electric and gas service from us. So again, it's always something that we keep in the forefront with the during the planning stages as well as the execution stages.
Yeah, with affordability being such an important issue for utility leaders today and for people who pay for power from utilities as well, often it feels like reliability doesn't necessarily move the needle quite as much as my bill is going up, right? When people see that the power stays on, that's not really the story. The story is that my bill feels more expensive, I feel unsatisfied in XYZ ways. So the storytelling element of the value that customers get out of their power staying on doesn't always resonate with the customers themselves. How did you at PSE&G communicate that value to customers? Tell me a little bit more about maybe some of the storytelling elements of this, knowing that it is a big investment, knowing that those big investments often make the customer's ears prick up and they start to get worried about affordability. How do you communicate that to them in a way that feels resonant and effective?
Well, we try to give anecdotal stories. We try to share when we go through larger events and storms since Sandy, how those investments paid off. We talk about the benefits, these benefits of planning ahead, modernizing the infrastructure proactively, because it also it helps avoid costly emergency repairs, larger scale system failures, the expenses that takes place to have to respond to an emergency because of one of these large scale events. It can be much more expensive time after time than investing into the infrastructure and making sure it doesn't get damaged by these events. So we try to share those stories.
Yeah, and I imagine that, there are measurable results is also helpful in expressing that value and sharing those stories. So, let's talk about how things have changed post Sandy, post these infrastructure and investment upgrades. In 2021, Hurricane Ida, potentially an opportunity to, really get a real look, a real evaluation at how some of these systems performed, especially as compared to Sandy a decade earlier. So, tell me about what you learned, what you saw, what happened. Did it all work? Did it all pan out?
It did. It absolutely did. So Tropical Storm Ida in 2021 yielded a lot of different results as far as outages were concerned. It had all of that rainfall and that flooding, and it did prove that our investments paid off. It avoided substation flooding damage that we saw impacted by Sandy. So we gave ourselves a very big yet humble high five for this accomplishment. We set a plan, we made a commitment, we did what we said we would, and the results are there to prove it. I mean, overall, our customers are seeing more measurable improvements with all of the upgrades we've made over the past decade. Outages are down by about 22%. and about 23% fewer customers are impacted when these outages occur. The past few years have been some of the best reliability performance on record. And when these outages do happen, we're restoring power faster than the national average.
How do some of these upgrades impact the system on more of the blue sky days?
So what we see on the blue sky days, is the integrating of technology allows us to pinpoint where these outages are, allows us to roll the right crews to a problem, communicate with our customers very quickly, give them a time of restoration, also restore these customers much quicker than we ever could.
I'm curious what kind of tech you feel like has moved the needle most for your business, for your customers. Any, more specific examples that you could point to is something that you were like, "Wow, this was worth it."
Well, what we recently invested in a new outage management system as well as a new automated meter infrastructure system, and they are integrated. So we have visibility down to the customer meter level, and as that's integrated with our outage management, it provides a lot of opportunity to troubleshoot from our dispatch centers. Again, roll trucks much more quicker to the problems that are being experienced in the field, being able to communicate with the customers and other stakeholders externally, really just do a lot of troubleshooting, really get a good big picture of things for us to be able to get respond to any types of problems and get the lights on a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take a moment now, Paul, to really look ahead. We got the 2012 version, the 2021 version. Now let's talk about what the 2026 and beyond version looks like of resilience for PSE&G. The grid landscape specifically, it feels very different than it did in 2012, even than it did in 2021 with IDA. Electrification, distributed energy systems, AI driven loads, data centers. How are you and your team shifting focus, if at all, when you're talking about and thinking about and strategizing around grid modernization, knowing that the needs of the grid are changing pretty quickly?
We serve millions of customers across the 22,000 miles of electric lines, the 18,000 miles of gas mains that we also have as well. We continue to modernize our grid, and we're utilizing smart technology with system monitoring, control, automation. We're strengthening local distribution circuits. And that's really all in preparation for system electrification, clean energy growth, and the overall increasing customer demand. So, one of the most important pieces of it, it's all about a lot of great talent here at PSE&G collaborating as a team, committed to focus on these ever-changing needs and these demands, and to make sure technology is part of the equation.
Do you feel like resilience gets more difficult as technology becomes a bigger part of the equation, or is the inverse true?
What I would say is it requires a lot more planning and a lot more talent to make sure that that integration of technology with resiliency is just the right recipe for our system.
So, as we're thinking about this version of resilience and a modern grid of the future, I'm curious how something like climate projections might factor into planning capital priorities as you're thinking about avoiding the next superstorm Sandy. There are certain realities that we have to face. These storms are getting more frequent, they're getting more intense. How do you plan for that as a team?
Well, climate impacts are a very big consideration, and we discuss it very, very often. Extreme weather, these stronger storms, heavier rainfalls, extreme temperature swings, both in the summer as well as in the winter seasons, changing weather patterns. Sometimes they're getting even more difficult to predict, and they all influence how we plan our infrastructure investments. So, we're also in some cases seeing these extreme weather conditions more often than we did in the past. So, we're increasing the incorporation of climate projections and all of the data that we gather from this into our long-term planning equation so we can prioritize our projects, so we can deliver the greatest resiliency benefits given what we have seen. I think what's very important to understand is from the weather patterns that we've seen, and we will probably see into the future, our work's not done.
How does that work continue? I would love to get your perspective on what it looks like to prioritize resilience moving into the future. If you're potentially, let's say, advising a utility or listener from a utility listening into this episode, maybe they're in a hurricane prone region, maybe they are somewhere where those temperature swings are affecting them as well, and they're on the start of this modernization journey. What are some of the tactical moves that you would suggest first? Can you give us some strategic advice?
Sure, sure. So, first, really have a good, clear understanding of what your biggest risks are, whether it's flooding, wind, storm surge, wildfire, or a combination of those. What can hit your system the hardest and impact your customers the longest? And get a good, clear understanding of that. Second, prioritize your investments that both improve your reliability and your resilience. It's always important to have a combination and assessing the prevention of future outages and with the reduction of outage times when customers do lose power. It's a careful balance that must be examined as well. And then the third, I would say, build a strong partnership with regulators, communities, other external stakeholders, because larger infrastructure improvements take a lot of collaboration and a lot of long term commitment and a lot of partnerships with the communities you serve. I can keep going. I would say another piece of it that's very important, you have to have a talented workforce, both in the technical and managerial field, as well as a skilled workforce trained and ready to take on such a big challenge. And finally, we discussed technology a bit today, making sure you have a solid technology roadmap integrated as part of all of these investment efforts.
Yeah, really, really helpful advice. Just out of my own personal curiosity and knowing that workforce is something that a lot of the guests on this show bring up and say we need a better workforce. We need to prioritize our people. What is your perspective, your POV here on the idea that the energy industry, the utility industry is facing a bit of a workforce dilemma? How do you find great people and how do you retain that talent at PSE&G?
Well, one of the important pieces of it is acknowledging that the workforce is the most important asset that you have. The people will always make the difference. Understanding that and valuing your employees and making sure they know they feel valued, most important piece of attracting them and retaining them. You take care of your employees will take care of your system and your customers.
Yeah. Yeah, makes perfect sense. And then the last follow-up here that I have for you, Paul, when it comes to improving and maintaining and prioritizing those relationships, you mentioned relationships with regulators, relationships with the community. I would love to hear a little bit more specifically on the regulator side of things, since we covered some of the community and storytelling aspects of this conversation. How do you prioritize those relationships? What has that been like for you in your experience?
Well, the first part of it is demonstrating strong operational excellence, showing your regulator that you have the ability to manage, operate, and maintain an electric and or electric gas system. Having that trust and that you have the ability to do so with top performance is the first thing. If you can keep the lights on and you can manage through these large events, that credibility goes a long way with regulators. Having that trust. Gives the ability to put forward a strong relationship and be able to present your cases for any type of infrastructure improvements and any investment opportunities that have to take place. And the third piece of it is between the customers, the communities, other governing agencies, having that partnership and having them advocate for you as well as being part of the community is very important.
Yeah, helpful insights, Paul. I feel like this episode is a masterclass in managing at a utility. So I hope our listeners are getting as much out of it as I have. I would love now to move into our lightning round. If you are down, we will do a quick rapid fire 3 questions, and I would love to get your perspective in just a sentence or two.
I'm ready.
All right. What is your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part is being part of such a great team with PSE&G. It is the people who not only make this company succeed, but it enables our customers to benefit. It's our employees who are never tiring. They're committed. They're so invested in doing the right thing each and every day. I'm really proud of our employees and excites me every day to come in each and every day and be with them with working with such a great group of people.
I love it. The team really does make all the difference. Okay, next question for you. Is there a piece of technology in the energy field that you feel really, really excited about in the coming years?
Well, before I answer that, I'm going to say that what really excites me about technology is the new generation in the workforce. How they're engaged, how they're eager to learn, and how they've grown up with technology since they were with children. They're ready to apply technology in so many different ways, allowing us to integrate our time tested experience with new innovation for the years to come. So, when it comes to different pieces of technology, and I mentioned earlier about our adage management system and our advanced metering infrastructure system. These were real wins. These give us visibilities, advanced troubleshooting and analysis, and provides many benefits to our customers that we would not have had or not even thought possible only a few years ago. So I attribute this to like just this collision of different generations of people dedicated to our company and to our customers to innovate and to continuously improve and provide real time results and value.
Absolutely. That collision is so important. All right. My final question for you. What's the most underrated part of New Jersey?
Oh, so I would say the most underrated part of New Jersey is the north end of the New Jersey Turnpike. Most people see just refineries, the airports, seaports, industries, factories, traffic jams, and the smell. What I see is a thriving and robust economy. I see communities of people, jobs, manufacturing, moving people and products all around, and it's all made possible by the essential electric and gas service that PSE&G provides 24/7 and 365. What I would say, any tourists flying at the Newark airport that have anything to say about that, you need an education on what it takes to be part of this most densely populated area of the most densely populated state in the country. It's not for everyone, but for those who choose to be part of it, it creates again that grit that we endure anything that gets thrown our way, and what makes us Jersey ready.
All right. I probably would have said tomatoes, but I like your answer better. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us on Power Perspectives today. It has been such a treat to hear more about your experience, to learn from all of the resilience and the investment and the infrastructure upgrades that have been made over the last decade and a half post Sandy. I know that our listeners will certainly benefit from hearing your perspective as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kinsey. It was really great being part of this.
Wonderful. And thank you to all of our listeners, as always, for tuning in to another episode of Power Perspectives. I'm Kinsey Grant Baker, and I will see you next time.